Sorry.
No, so what can you tell us about this particular?
Okay, this is what is called by collectors the number 3 Barbie, which means nothing to anyone but a collector. And why that matters is that Barbie was first brought onto the scene in March 1959 at the New York Toy Fair. And the Barbie introduced that year is what we call the number 1 Barbie. So if collectors ever talk about having a number 1 Barbie, which is worth $7,000-8,000, there were only a small number of them issued for that New York Toy Fair. Then quickly they went to number 2 and number 3 models, this being the number 3 model, and others of mine are later than that. So this is 1960, so a year later. And what's interesting is you can see how pale she is. She's almost white, in fact. If you close up, you'll see that her skin tone has become ivory-ish towards white, maybe even a slight bluish cast to it. Now, she didn't start that colour. She started tan, like the other Barbies in the collection, but they hadn't stabilised the dye in the plastic. So the first 3 Barbies are distinctive to collectors because they all become pale and almost white, and after number 3, number 4 and so forth, all stay tan coloured, as I can show you another one.
So how many would there be of this particular model?
Made ever, you mean?
How many?
Well, the first number 1 Barbie, about 100,000 were made, we think, but a very small number survived. This one, they probably were already producing, it could have been even up to 1 million, but again, not that many survived. But I think, easily 100,000 of these would probably survive all over the world, mainly America. Okay. This wasn't sold in Australia. She didn't come to Australia till 1964. We were well past this era of doll. And you can see from her outfit, that's classic 1950s couture.
Yeah, it is, yes.
And she's got her coat with the half lining here and the belt on her pencil skirt, her little pumps, and a hat, as any well-bred woman would always wear a hat in those days. And she has a long ponytail.
Yeah, so she's got the belt across the waist. So, that's typically...
The nipped-in waist,
the nipped waist, that's it. That's what
Classic.
I'm looking for.
Classic.
Yeah,
and like any well-bred lady at the time, she's out, and so she's wearing her gloves.
Gloves, yes.
And these, of course, are the little details that collectors love, because you can imagine how many of them simply went up the vacuum cleaner. Same with the shoes. To have the right shoes to match is a rarity, and even the hat, they would often get lost or damaged. So for a collector, what makes it desirable is that she has her accessories which belong with the outfit. So the hat, the gloves, the shoes, and she also has a purse in the cupboard. And so, yes, really that's the way a collector would look at the doll. She is a rare doll wearing a fairly rare outfit with most of her accessories.
She's very stylish, isn't she?
She's a very stylish lady.
In a 1950s way.
And in fact, when you look at the face, she looks like a grown woman. We tend to think of Barbie as young, teenage almost. Yeah. But in fact, when Barbie first started, she was definitely a grown woman. She had career outfits. She had names of career type things. She had a nurse's uniform. She had an office outfit. She had, what else was she? Good heavens, I've got some in the back row. I mean, she was an airline steward. She was a grown-up woman. Yeah. And so what the young girl was meant to do was put her fantasies and so forth onto the doll, like a paper doll. In fact, that was the creator's idea. She'd seen her daughter, whose name was Barbara, by the way, hence Barbie. Okay. Ruth Handler saw her daughter playing with paper dolls and saw her interact with them by putting her own views of her fantasy future onto the paper doll. So when she created the doll Barbie, she very much created a doll who was sold in a swimsuit, but you could buy an outfit, many outfits in fact, to turn her into an office girl, a business girl, a nurse, as I said, an airline stewardess, a drum majorette, all the different, a bride, all the different careers. And so the young daughter playing with her would then interact with the doll in this fantasy role play. And that was the idea behind Barbie, and it took off immensely. It was incredibly successful, and to this day there's still a lot of little girls who would do exactly that with their dolls. They would dress them up in their bridal outfits and marry them off to the boy dolls. And so
going back to the 1950s and knowing that there would be very few work opportunities or careers for women, this would be very appealing, wouldn't you think?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, one of the things I always loved about Barbie is she's actually quite a strong female role model. She is not the wussy pink frou-frou thing that she's turned into now. She was someone who was an independent woman. She never actually got married, and she always had careers right through her life. And the wonderful thing was when in the 70s you started to be able to have things like Dr. Barbie, not just Nurse Barbie, but Dr. Barbie. So she moved out of the mainstream female careers into a normal career path that anybody could have held. So the equality movement sort of caught up with her in the 70s. And I think that from a sociological point of view, that the doll shows our history really nicely. It encapsulates aspects of social history in the last 50 years. Yeah. So that's a lot of the appeal of the doll to me. Yeah. It's both fashion, it's social history, it's got many interesting aspects as a collector.
Yeah, very good. Okay, I'm going to hit you with a hard question.
Okay.
Why do you collect these dolls?
Well, in one way, it's a simple answer, and that is I always wanted one as a child. And that was in probably mid-60s, so around 1965, 67. And my mother's constant answer was, we can't afford to buy you one. And while my elder sister, lucky her, got one Barbie, which I coveted, I never got a Barbie. And I often joke that if my mother had spent $3 in 1966, she could have saved me thousands as an adult.
Good on you. All right. Thank you for that.
Pleasure.
That's great.